Is Alison joining? Cool. Welcome, Alison.
Yep, welcome back.
Hi, Shane.
Michael. And Steve. We've got Hillary.
Morning again.
Morning, Steve. Hi, Michael. Again.
Hello, Helen.
So we're short Phil and Hillary.
Phil had that other meeting too,
Yeah.
so he made it late. Yeah.
Two minutes.
Oh, Hillary's an apology today. I've just seen it. Sorry, my fault. Yep.
That's right.
Yep, I just got it there. She texts me.
So then we'll probably so when we get to 10 we'll have that, yeah. Oh, he's Phil. Perfect time.
Great.
Welcome, Phil.
All right, back again.
Good. Perfect timing. Right. Good to go.
Good morning and welcome to our reconvened council meeting from yesterday. Today we have two apologies, one from Councillor Campbell and one from Councillor Humphrey. So just to go through the purpose of our meeting today is to receive the written and oral submissions in relation to the draft bylaws and policies, particularly around freedom camping bylaw, the public places bylaw, the stock movement and grazing bylaw, the revocation of part 5 of the traffic safety and road use bylaw, and the stock underpass policy. So yesterday we heard from a number of our submitters, and this morning we are going to hear from a few more. So how this works is that each of our speakers has been given 15 minutes. They have 10 minutes to present to us the highlights of their submission and the key points they wish to make to us, and then we will open it up for questions from our team to our submitter. Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, do you need a motion to approve the apologies? If so, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Ford.
Yes, please.
Yes, we do. Thank you. And Councillor Short as a seconder.
So I move that the apologies of Councillor Campbell and Councillor Humphrey be accepted.
Thank you. And that was seconded by Councillor Short. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against, that motion is carried. Thank you for reminding me of that. So, having set the basis there, we'll move into our first submitter, and welcome to Anna.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for your submission and for joining us today to speak to it. So your submission is in relation to our stop movement bylaw. So I'll hand it over to you. We have your submission, we have read it, but you're welcome to speak to it.
Thank you. You have to forgive me. I'm slightly nervous, so you have to just forgive me.
Please don't be. We're all on Zoom and we're all in this together.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to talk to you regarding my submission on the issue of goat tethering. So far, over 7,000 people in New Zealand have signed a petition via change.org requesting the prohibition of tethering goats on roadsides and elsewhere. Goats are highly intelligent, kind and incredibly friendly herd animals with a willing and cheeky nature who need the company of other herd animals. They are not as hardy as most people think, as they do not have a covering of fat on the underside of their skin and therefore get cold very quickly. They're also not waterproof and they hate the rain. Imagine training your pet or even your child in the open without adequate food, water or shelter and expecting them to be happy. What is it within us that thinks it is okay to chain a defenseless animal up for its entire life without any other care, company, attention or freedom? The goat has been given no choice with this enforcement, and would you choose this way of life? Goats are not lawn mowers. Why can't people just use a lawnmower or a weed whacker? If the land is too dangerous, then it is too dangerous to put a goat on due to the possibility of self-strangulation. Goats struggle to process just grass to eat. They are natural browsers, similar as such to deer, and goats need a wide variety of plants to maintain health. They're very good at eating noxious weeds, as their saliva has the ability to detoxify the plant toxins in an incredibly clever way. They suffer from huge worm burdens if kept on grass alone, which we would not accept in our beef and lamb industries, as it would be considered cruel to impose such a burden on them, along with a consequent detriment to the meat industry due to unhealthy and malnourished animals entering the food chain. So why are goats any different? By being tethered, they will also not only suffer from starvation and malnutrition, but also from heat exhaustion, exposure to the cold, and the possibility of self-strangulation. They're a sitting duck when it comes to being attacked either by roaming dogs or people wishing them more harm. Many goats quietly suffer years or entire lives, a lonely, sad, depressing life, only to be relieved by a person perhaps 2 or 3 times a week stopping by and making sure they are still alive, literally for a matter of minutes, and to top up their water if they're one of the lucky ones. Bear in mind that this water could also be knocked over very soon after it has been refilled, leaving the goat thirsty for an indefinite amount of time. It is known that goats tethered are very friendly. Do you wonder if perhaps they're absolutely desperate for company? They have no other animal company to live with or play with. And yes, goats play. Goats should be able to display their normal herd behaviour. They cannot do this if they are tethered and alone. We don't expect sheep, beef or even alpacas to live a life alone, as we know they are, and therefore promote the fact that they are herd animals and should be kept together. You'd be hard pushed to even buy an alpaca as a single animal, as they can actually get so depressed they've been known to die of loneliness if kept alone. So why again do we think this is right to do this to an equally, if not more intelligent herd animal? What has a goat done to deserve to be treated this way? And why do we allow it? We do it because we can, and apparently some of us don't know any better. And if we do, we ignore it, as most animals are wrongly considered not to have feelings or emotions, but you only have to surf the internet and Facebook to be bombarded with the actual opposite to see how misjudged animals and their emotions have been. We all smile at a happy pig or rescued puppies from earthquakes, yet we drive past one of the most miserable and sad existences in the animal world every day. Even animals bred for their meat are treated better. At least they have the freedom to roam without being tied to the ground or fence and are able to be part of a herd, even if it is for a short time. The time is now to make these changes and ban the tethering of goats on roadsides and in fact anywhere. It is an outdated practice which is cruel, abhorrent, and in this day and age, it is also not excusable anymore to say we don't know any better. We do, you do, and we need to make it happen. If you're struggling to believe what I'm saying, then I suggest you go and spend some time with a kind and friendly goat on the roadside and perhaps put yourself, your pet, or your child in their place and see if you could walk away knowing you're leaving it to be bored, depressed, in danger, malnourished, and very, very lonely. Yet you as a council and human beings have the ability to stop this. The goats cannot help themselves. They have done nothing to deserve tethered life. I know goats can be difficult to keep in a paddock as they're incredibly good jumpers and they're very inquisitive. But this is no excuse anymore. If you really wanted a pet goat, you would make your paddocks goat-proof. They cannot be considered a loved pet if you are prepared to tether them and you clearly don't know goats or goat care. They rely on us to help them. All animals are programmed to survive. These goats are being forced to endure life. They don't enjoy it. Please help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I love the way you've put all that information together so well. So I'm going to open it up for the rest of our team to, if they have any questions of your submission. Councillor Short.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was a very informative and heartfelt submission, and I think we all heard what you said. One of the things that I'm interested in is there would be quite a lot of tethered goats in our district. If we change the bylaw and people were no longer allowed to do that, what would you recommend is the process? That how do we transition the goats that are on the side of the road now? The owners may simply take them into their own property and tether them within their own property. What recommendations would you have for goats who might have to have a change of lifestyle, for the better, we hope?
Yeah, thank you. I think on the first instance you do that, you need to reach out to these people and say if they have any problems in transitioning their goats to new homes or new areas or new paddocks, you know, that we're able to help. There are various groups around the country who can step in and assist with these problems. You know, and a lot of the goats that have been tethered from a very young age don't know how to jump. You'd be very surprised at the amount of goats that you can see on the roads that, you know, that don't know how to behave as goats, and therefore you put them in a paddock and they will stand there because they don't know how to, you know, how to interact with themselves or anybody else or anything else. And so the first thing probably would be goats would just stand in a paddock and would walk so far as their tether would have allowed them to for however many previous years, until they got to grips with the fact that they are free. You know, you may encounter some problems with goats jumping out, but that's the whole idea of a goat. You know, if you take on a goat as a pet, you know, and you research all the you know, the ins and outs of animal care before you go and purchase an animal. You know, we certainly do if you buy puppies or dogs or, you know, or horses. You know, it's behavioural issues and patterns that you might encounter before you have them. You know, but because goats are so compliant with what we expect of them, we think that it's that they're okay being tethered, whereas actually if you know a goat's personality, you know that they're far from okay. You know, I have two of my own goats and they are, you know, friendly and white goats, their names are, and they are just superb together. You know, they roam a forest, they play, you know, they headbutt, they do things that goats do. So yeah, it wouldn't be easy, but there are people you can reach out to help with that transition, certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is a good point. If we need to go through that transition stage, Councillor Belsky. Just unmute yourself, please.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you for the submission. My concern is the goats that I have seen on the road, and I've seen a lot myself, I seem very contented, but I do understand there's dogs and of course thieving, but how do we get on with this big drought we've just gone through or going through, where the goat loves a bit of roughage and out on the, and they've got no feed left in the farm or on their lifestyle block. They got no money really to buy feed, so there's all this grass on the road frontage, so they just graze their goat there. Do you think that is out of the question too, or could we have sort of circumstances that allow it in our bylaw? Thank you.
Thank you. No, basically, no. I mean, if you're not prepared to put your sheep on the side of the road, you know, behind electric or something, you know, and that's a very good way, a surefire way of getting your verges grazed. As we know, sheep are very good grazers and they are designed to live on grass, and they will probably cut your verges down far, far better than any goat would. And the impact that a goat would have on your feed for the year, if you have one goat tethered, is completely minimal compared to your 20 cattle or your 500 sheep. So no, you can't even accept putting goats tethered on the side of the road just to help tie the verges. That's what we have a lawnmower for.
Thank you. So is there any final questions from our team for Anna? No. So Anna, thank you very much. It's been very well put this morning with your words and with your submission, and we thank you for taking the time to do that. And so we will move on to our next submitter. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so we move on to our next submitter, which is Gary Stoneley. Welcome, Gary. All Points Camping New Zealand, and you'll find his submission on page 79. Excuse me. On page 75, you'll find Gary's submission. So Gary, we have read your submission, and thank you for electing to join us and speak to that. So you're welcome to highlight any of the key points in your submission, and then we will allow time for questions.
Okay, I see we've got a very low turnout today.
Unfortunately, we've had some trouble connecting to YouTube this morning, so there's been some technical issues.
Okay, that's understandable. Okay, firstly, thank you for those of you who have actually read through my submission. The key points of my submission effectively are as to why in a district such as Manawatu, where we don't actually have a significant freedom camping bylaw, we have, a significant freedom camping problem, that we have one of the most intensive or extensive freedom camping bylaws being put together. I have to question if it's basically a bylaw being put together just for the sake of doing it, to regulate and to control, or is it actually being done with the intention of welcoming and encouraging people to our region? Yeah, it's a little bit disconcerting in a way. We've got a fantastic region here, but we seem to like to over-regulate. There are a lot of things in the bylaw, the putting together of it. It's been very well constructed. There's no question about that. But yeah, it just seems to be a little bit over the top, to be honest. Do we have any actual statistics that actually show where the perceived problems are that make this bylaw proportionate? Under the Freedom Camping Act, the bylaw has to be proportionate to the problem. So where is the problem?
Okay, thank you. We'll take that question on board.
There are a couple of things in the bylaw which I've actually highlighted, and if you've actually read through my submission, you'll see that I've stated that a local authority, and I've quoted, that a local authority may make a bylaw under the Freedom Camping Act to restrict freedom camping, only if it is satisfied that it is necessary for several reasons, and one is to protect the area, one is to protect the health and safety of the people who may visit the area, obviously to protect the area, and the most appropriate and proportionate way of addressing the perceived problem. If the bylaw is not the most proportionate way of addressing the problem, then it is effectively illegal under the Freedom Camping Act, and it can actually be called up for judicial review. There are a lot of, I guess, odd little bits and pieces in the bylaw. For example, in Sanson, where for some random reason it's been determined that at the reserve at Sanson Reserve, which is accessed and used, and to be honest, it's not the nicest of places to stop anyway. For some reason, it says we're going to limit it to 3 people, to 3 vehicles. There's no justifiable reason for that. Realistically, it's a very noisy area. It's where trucks accelerate and decelerate. You're not going to get a lot of people staying there, but why have you got a bylaw that specifies these parameters? There are several different things, I guess, regarding freedom camping and so on, and a lot of it is perception. In a lot of areas, bylaws are actually brought in because they think it may detract from basically the visual aesthetics of the area. In some cases, it's because you may decide, well, it's a residential area, therefore we have to have a bylaw to stop people freedom camping in those areas. But do you actually have that problem here? Under your, and it's something I actually missed in my written submission, so I'll just mention it, but I accept that it isn't included, is you have a section in there on road reserves to exclude road reserves. And you basically state, or in the your points with significance assessment, it basically states the use of the road reserve for freedom camping could significantly detract from residential character and amenity. That's not valid. Okay, if you're making the bylaw on freedom camping, it has to be valid. You have to follow the rules. I'd like to really encourage people to come through and use this area. I don't think we have a problem. One of the issues with people travelling, and particularly around this region, is that people basically bypass us. 90% of the travelling public go straight down State Highway 1 from the mountains straight through to Wellington. A few go through to Taranaki, a few go through to Hawke's Bay, and the odd ones come through to Manawatu. So we don't have a significant issue. If we're going to encourage people to this region, we need to have a bylaw which is very, very easy to understand and simple to follow. A lot of regions basically say these are the recommended places to go and stay. That's it, and it works. So I guess it's up to you guys to actually make the decision. Obviously, you're going to vote and you're going to decide how you want this bylaw to go through. You can choose to continue to have a very restrictive bylaw. It does have issues. It does come across as not welcoming to the Manawatu district. Or you can have a look and say, well, how can we make this more amenable? If we have got, and under what, so many pages, it's huge. If you have got a lot of areas in there that have actually just been put in there just for the sake of putting them in there, then take them out. They don't need to be there. So I guess you've all read through my bylaw. Read through my submission. I've mentioned in there about the Bill of Rights, which obviously that we need to adhere to. Just having a look, just thinking. Areas like the Hurley Reserve, which isn't used very much, that has actually been identified as being a high risk and therefore should be prohibited from freedom camping. But throughout New Zealand, every riverbed, under every bridge, every low-lying area is at risk of flooding. We've got areas which are at higher risk of all sorts of other things. But for some reason, we've identified Hurley Reserve. Yeah, I just have to do those things. I guess an important thing I want to finish on, I know I've got limited time and I'm not good at doing submissions like this. Mount Lees Reserve. Mount Lees Reserve is obviously a tricky one because you have got your reserve management plan and it has specific requirements on certain reserves, Mount Lees, Kauai Park included. But Mount Lees historically has actually been used for people to stop over. Even though under the previous bylaw, it basically stated that people weren't allowed to actually camp there. People have actually still been doing it and have been actually allowed. So you've set precedents on that. If there is a specific reason why we don't want people stopping there, okay, then let's go back to the reserves management plan and review Mount Lees and decide what needs to be done. But it would be very disappointing to see that one basically made or continued technically to be a prohibited area. And I'm not going to comment on Kauai Park here because I understand that Kauai Park is a much bigger issue. But I think it is important that we actually do welcome people to the Manawatu. If we do not have a significant issue with freedom camping, if we do not have problems, then why are we making such an extensive bylaw?
Thanks, Gary. You've raised a number of points there, taken out of your submission and some extra points. So thank you, appreciate that. We'll open it up for questions and Councillor Ford.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Gary, for your full submission. Two quick questions. One relating to the Sanderson domain. Just the NZTA have made a comment that they support the limit of 3 self-contained vehicles at any one time. I just wouldn't mind your comment on that, please. And just while I've got the Himatangi situation, we've heard extensively from the Himatangi community that they don't want freedom campers in Himatangi. They say they have problems with freedom campers at Himatangi. Do you have a comment there specifically? Because we've heard quite extensively from them.
No, but I think the thing is that when we actually state that we're excluding a reason, an area, for example, residents may say we don't want people in our area. If they have a problem with freedom campers there, you have got so many laws that can actually be enforced. I'm not sure if you actually need to actually have a specific bylaw restricting people from stopping in a public area. Himatangi is quite blanket. It's quite a blanket shutdown. The specific risks haven't actually been identified. I guess that's what I'm coming down to. If to make the bylaw valid, you have to have effectively a specific problem. As far as the Sanderson ones, so yeah, LTSA, let's limit it to 3 motorhomes or camper vans or self-contained units going in there at a time, but let's also limit it to 3 cars with trailers with basically blow carts on the back. Put things into perspective. I don't think there's any more dangerous entry or access to that area from a person in a car or a camper van or a vehicle with a trailer. It is no different to anywhere else. It is right on the edges of Sanson. I don't think it's a highly popular area, but the reality is it's actually a marketing point too. Every area you have in the Manawatu district is an opportunity to promote the region, to promote businesses, to promote events. Yeah, I just looked at it and I thought, well, hey, someone's randomly said, well, let's limit it to 3. Your reserves, your road reserves is probably a more significant issue, because you're basically saying, well, we don't really want the look of these vehicles around our areas are going to detract from it, so let's ban it. That's like saying, well, you don't like the look of someone's junky car or somebody's rundown house. We need to actually think about what we're actually doing legally rather than what we're doing for aesthetics. Beautiful is good, but it's not always fair and practical.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you for that answer. One final question from anyone? No? So thanks, Gary, again for your submission and making time to join us this morning. You've made a number of points there that we'll take into account with our deliberations. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You have a great day. Bye-bye.
Okay, we move on to our next submitter. Welcome, John. I see you there. You've joined us. So welcome to the new technology via Zoom.
Welcome.
Your submission is here on page 46. We have read that, and in regards to stop movement. So the floor is yours to highlight any of the points in there that you wish to raise, and then we'll allow time for some questions.
Right. Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, firstly, I agree with the temporary fencing materials used for roadside fencing. Grazing outside your own property or property that you lease. If you graze outside other people's property, I'd like to see written permission from the landowner adjacent to the road for the fellow that's grazing it to get permission, written permission from the landowner outside their land. I strongly agree with grazing this side of the road. It does keep it nice and tidy. And I totally agree with removing the stock at during the hours of darkness. Now that is one issue that I strongly believe in, because of if animals escape at night, especially black cattle, they're very hard to see. Yeah, just and just another point there is if somebody's grazing, they should only graze the adjacent person's property, not 2 or 3 k's up the road, because they won't be able to get them off the road at night. Just moving on to the bylaw regarding a stock movement and crossing a road. You've got in your bylaw distance of 600 metres in front and behind the stock. Now, this is too much distance, especially in country windy roads. That is a distance of 1.2 kilometres. Now, that's a lot of road to control. My submission is that you bring that down to 100 metres clear visibility, with a further 50 metres from the vehicle with the sign on to the stock, and the same in the front. It's, especially in windy roads, it's easy to you've got to have control of your stock, and if you 50 meters back, you've got more control, and you know where your stock are, especially if one goes up a bank or goes over the side of a bank, you can see where it's gone. Yeah, that's sort of my submission on that. I totally disagree with the 600 meters. I would like to see that back to 100 meters plus 50 meters, and with signage on the pilot vehicle and flashing light. Just going down to the next one, the exemptions for stock getting onto the road. I'd like to see vehicles, that if a vehicle goes through a fence or vandalism to fencing, put in the act there. It's very hard to control stock in your property if somebody's gone through your fence. The other comment there is that I don't know if council can do anything about it, but emergency services, the lead agency in a car accident is police. They should be made to contact the landowner if a vehicle has gone through the fence, to make sure the landowner is aware of it. The other thing. Now, the other question I'd like to raise is the emergency fencing. Now, if you have a dropout in a storm, a dropout under your fence, but does not affect the carriageway, I'd like to see that you can use Waratah standards and netting to temporarily fence that off until a solution can be made. I agree with this section 19.2. I have read that, and there is a few changes that you will have to make regarding the distance from a clear visibility of distance that will need to be changed. And the other one, the number of cattle that you can drive on the road is 200. I see that in your submission you've got 450. It's all right. And 1,000 head of sheep. The other one is just to update your animal welfare clause, which I think is 2017 now instead of 1990. I've done 50 years of farming. I have driven cattle from Bolton to Fielding up until the mid-80s. I do know stock movements on the road, and I do regularly shift stock across the road, and we've had no injuries, accidents in the 50 years. So I think I'm doing a reasonably good job on that. Now, yep, I'm open to questions. You met now.
Thank you, John. Thank you for a very thorough submission, and that there's a number of points you've made there, and the point that you're basing this on your experience, and so that's very valid to take into account. going to open it up to the team. I see Councillor Short has a question.
Thank you very much, John. That's very comprehensive, and yes, 50 years of experience. What more could we ask for? I just wanted to help us understand better the 600-metre sightline for moving stock up the road, and I just wondered if you could elaborate if a farmer was moving sheep or cattle up the road a couple of kilometres and had to adhere to the 600-metre sight lines. Could you give us an idea of how many people that would take to manage moving a herd or a flock, when you think mostly through the Manawatu, most farms only have 1 or 2 people? You'd have to wait until you'd either have the family at home or you'd have to get the neighbours to help you. So how many people do you think it would take to move stock if we did adhere to what's recommended?
You would be looking at least 4 people, and if you had side roads to go past, it'd take 4 people, where at the moment we only use 2, and we've got good control of our stock, and we try to let our stock drift a little bit so that it gives ample room for cars or vehicles to go through the stock. The front person sometimes has got to stop the front if cars are going the same direction of the stock, just to get vehicles through. But the answer is, yeah, it would take a minimum of 4 people.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's we're taking into consideration. Any further questions of John? Councillor Quarry.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, thanks, John, for coming along, and I do appreciate your involvement in moving of stock, having worked with John many years ago. So I know you have a great deal of understanding in regard to stock. I wouldn't settle on a actual distance. I'd call it a tactical bound, and yeah, it's some areas it can be a lot further out, some areas can be a lot shorter, and it depends on when corners approach and so forth. So in a way, I wouldn't get too hung up over the actual distance, but it's the ability to be able to spot stock with plenty of time to react to that. So we'll work away at that and try and give it some consideration to make it an easily understood method of approaching it. But thanks once again. It's certainly appreciated having your input.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions of John? Well, thank you, John. Very comprehensive, and as others have said, based on your experience. So we'll certainly take all that on board. So thank you for your written submission and taking time today. So we wish you well for the rest of the day and the weekend.
Thank you.
Right, okay, we will move on. Do we have Janet with us? Don't see Janet there with us as yet.
No, so the suggestion is we invite Coralie to talk to us.
Okay. So councillors, you will be aware that we had a couple of late submitters to speak. We had one yesterday and one today, which is Coralie from Fed Farmers. Coralie is with us, so we will jump to her. Now, you don't have in front of you a written submission. There was a bit of confusion about the extension of time for submissions, and as we went into lockdown. So we have committed Coralie to speak to us today. So welcome, Coralie, and the floor's yours, and then we'll allow for questions at the end.
Can you see my video?
No, we can't see you.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Oh, that's all right. That'll I'm sure that'll do. Yeah. So I I was contacted on must have been Tuesday to let me know that this was proceeding, so thank you very much for the time to speak this morning. So on the 23rd of April, on behalf of Federated Farmers, I made a short submission to Council requesting that the bylaw review be withdrawn and instead reconsulted at a later date, perhaps part of the wider rural zone consultation. Please note that my submission and the comments today regard specifically the stock movement and grazing bylaw and the draft stock underpass policy.
Excuse me, Coralie, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're having difficulty hearing you. You're fading in and out. Can I ask anyone else who's not muted to mute, please, which may help with that. And we'll give it another go. But you were fading in and out, so it may pay to start again.
I'm just formally stopping my video, so hopefully that helps. Yeah, so sorry, I'll just briefly start again then. So I did make a submission on the 23rd of April asking that the bylaw review be deferred. And I just wanted to reconfirm that and just note that my submission then and today just relates directly to the stock movement and grazing bylaw and also the draft stock underpass policy. So at the time of my submission, I noted that I hadn't been able to effectively consult with members, which meant that it was not appropriate for me to submit on their behalf at this time. To expand briefly on this now, the following have been problematic. So I haven't been able to hold consultation meetings with members, either formally via specific meetings or informally at events like field days. And that is one of the main ways that I guess I get feedback from my members about particular regulatory changes. I also haven't been able to undertake a post out to members to seek feedback, and that's particularly important given that we have a number of members without email, and also a few who have opted to not receive communications via email. And then for those that we do get email, we've found that the read rate for items has declined during the COVID-19 response. And I believe that there are a number of factors that are driving this, but the biggest ones that I'm hearing are to do with email overload and also a limited ability to get in front of the computer, possibly because of homeschooling. So in addition to this, in addition to COVID, farmers have been dealing with drought and on the back of what I will call consultation fatigue. So the previous 6 months have been really full on for farmers. And there's been a stream of regulatory proposals from central government, followed by requests from Federated Farmers and their industry body groups to read and understand the proposals and make their own submissions. In the face of these things, the bylaw review could be considered insignificant. However, I don't consider that it is. So before submitting my request that the bylaw review be deferred, I had begun drafting a submission on behalf of the province using lessons that we gained from other districts. However, I decided against putting forward a generic submission, as I think it's important that the district farmers directly feed into what's being proposed. I called a handful of members at random I thought would have an interest in the submission, and of the 5 that I was able to speak to, 2 weren't aware it was being consulted, and those remaining had heard about the bylaw. However, they weren't across the details too much and also were of the impression that the consultation had been deferred. Perhaps this is confusion because of the decision to delay the outstanding natural landscape change. Regardless, they were all keen to learn more and perhaps submit if possible. I know that a poll of 5 is probably a bit dodgy in terms of statistical significance. However, while I would have liked to have called more farmers, there isn't much quiet time in my house at the moment with a 2- and a 3-year-old at home. So when considering the feedback I had received and further when reading the submissions that I guess came through to council yesterday, or when I had a chance to read them, more concerned that the consultation process hasn't been very effective at this time. And so I'd therefore like to formally ask council again to defer consultation to a later date, which I believe is possible when referring to the introduction provided in the consultation documentation. In particular, I note that while there may be some urgency to complete the review for the remaining bylaws, traffic safety and road use bylaw will not expire until the 21st of December and will continue to have legal effect until the 21st of December 2022. I also understand that council have already agreed to delay the review of the remaining parts of the traffic safety and road use bylaw until 2021, in order to consider the outcome of the Fielding Town Centre refresh and the Fielding Town Centre car parking survey. So perhaps a more appropriate course of action for council might be to retain the current bylaw and review it as a whole in 2021. Thanks.
Thanks, Coralie. Yeah, the sound was fading in and out, but just to clarify, the point that you're raising today is that due to a number of reasons and the COVID situation, Fed farmers have been unable to consult with their members or engage, and you think there's a number of reasons. People are emailed out, etc. And what you're asking is for council to extend the consultation period for the stock movement and underpass bylaws.
Yep, exactly. I think that members would actually like to have their 10 cents on this, and you know, especially when reading through, I think it was John's submission. I mean, I'm sure that the logistics of what's stated in the bylaw will be an impact to them. So, and I mean, like it might just be a little bit of a tweak here and there, or not sure where it will end, but yeah, it would be good if, in terms of process, if they were able to participate.
Thank you. So thank you for raising that with us. We'll put that into the mix for our decision making. So thank you for taking the time today to raise that with us, and have a good weekend.
Cool, thank you.
Excuse me, Your Worship.
Councillor Casey?
Yeah, thank you. Will we have her submission, please, in writing? I think she had some really valid, Coralie's some really valid points, but it was frustrating with the volume, so I wanted to get a better sense, particularly from where Fed Farmers was coming from.
I can definitely email it, because I was talking from notes. Yeah.
Okay, it sounded like, thanks, Coralie. It sounded like you're reading from notes, so hence my comment. Thank you for your submission too.
Thank you. So we'll make sure that Coralie's points, when she sends those in, will be circulated to everybody. Thank you. So we'll go back to, and welcome to Janet, and I also see Linda is online as well from CEDA, so welcome. Thank you for taking time with your submission. We're on page 30 in our agenda. And Janet is speaking in regards to our freedom camping proposed bylaw. So welcome, Janet. We have your submission and you're welcome to speak to it, but also we'll leave some time for questions.
Morena, thank you for having us and for the opportunity to speak. I've got Linda joining me as well today, so she's going to kick off, and we'll hopefully have time for questions too.
Welcome, Linda.
Morena. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide feedback on the Manawatu District Council Freedom Camping Bylaw and for hearing us today. We support the bylaw overall and will take our submission as read. We're here today to offer support for the bylaw and also some additional comments for consideration. We would like to reinforce the importance of treating separately the certified and non-certified motorhomes to ensure that not all freedom campers are essentially tarred with the same brush. The word freedom campers can evoke sometimes the worst of images, images such as littering, using our countryside as a bathroom and not spending any money where they camp. Our region, we know, and specifically the district, is not like a Queenstown or similar, where that type of behaviour is quite common. So we would encourage the self-contained motorhome community, if we encourage the self-contained motorhome community, we think we'll be able to more fully leverage the benefits of the positive impacts that they will leave with the district and on the wider region. We do want to encourage you to consider how this bylaw can be used to stimulate and attract visitors to the district. In light of what's currently happening within the visitor sector, domestic and international, and the impacts that this will have immediately, but also in the medium to long term on our retail and hospitality sectors, the approach that the council decides to take on welcoming all visitors to the district will be crucial in our economic recovery, and also as well for the attraction of the staycation Kiwis, our domestic visitors, as well as continuing to build our international reputation. While motorhome travellers, you know, it's quite right, in your Facebook survey, it was identified that they don't spend their money in accommodation or motels or on a holiday park fee. They do buy coffee, they buy food, they buy supplies, services, petrol, and entertainment. They explore our beautiful region, and importantly, they spread that feedback amongst their peers on what a welcoming place the district is to visit. This tell your friends endorsement should not be overlooked in terms of its importance in the domestic market in particular. And that's even more important to us right now in the challenges that we're facing within the district, but nationally in response to COVID-19. Prohibiting freedom camping, including certified self-contained vehicles in the Fielding town centre, could put the warm, welcoming reputation that you've built up so well at risk, and exclude valuable visitors that our community really needs, especially now. Pre-COVID-19 numbers, we were 80% domestic, with the higher value motorhomes such as the NZMCA members coming to the district and enjoying our rural communities and towns. These visitors are repeat visitors, they're advocates, and they're also future potential residents in many cases. So we've got an opportunity here to make them feel very welcome with the right guidelines in place for the good of the region and our economy. With COVID-19, things are going to remain a little bit uncertain, and the future will continue to be largely domestic for us in that short to medium term. It's been said that nationally we are going to see probably many, many more Kiwis in motorhomes exploring their own backyard as we move down and through these alert levels. So it makes it even more critical in that competitive environment to get the bylaw right and reflective of your community and our region's visitor market, and as well our own unique and really special welcoming culture that's focused on people. Lastly, we would like you, and we really strongly would encourage you to engage with us and our team and the expertise that we have within CEDA when it comes to decisions around the visitor sector. We would be very happy to work closely with Manawatu District Council on proactively communicating the benefits of motorhome visitors to the district, and also to support changing any of those more negative perceptions that often come with the words freedom camping. And we want to ensure that together we work to boost our domestic tourism as we move forward to, let's say, a new and slightly reshaped visitor market in New Zealand. Janet, is there anything you want to add?
No, again, I just we really endorse that you're still moving ahead with the review of the bylaw and fully support it, and it's exciting to see. Fielding, especially, were one of the early adopters of the Motorhome Friendly Towns program with New Zealand Motor Caravan Association, and I think, you know, Fielding and a lot of our rural communities really sum up what that program's about in terms of the motorhome friendly towns, and that people can come here and spend widely in our economy and engage with our communities. And we've seen the benefits of that from funding community hall paintings, I know, especially up in northern Manawatu, to creating lifelong friendships and engagements, and boosting our hospitality sector, which is really going to need it in the future. So just, yeah, thanks for letting us come along and speak.
Thanks, Linda and Janet, for all of those points, and it's very valid, you know, as you say right now, the situation we're in and the need for focusing on our domestic visitors, which this region does well, and we're going to need to keep that up. So thank you for that. I'm going to open it up to the team. Are there any questions of either Linda or Janet? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Linda and Janet, for your submission. A number of the other submitters that we've had on the freedom camping bylaw have suggested that we're being a little bit over regulatory, that you know, things like not being able to pull over on a road verge, even if it's up the Pohongona Valley, or even some comment on what is a certified self-contained vehicle, and other comments around why would it have to be a self-contained vehicle if they've pulled into a reserve that has an ablution block, etc. I just wondered whether you've already offered to work closely together, but are there some things there that you would pick up and say that perhaps they are a little bit over regulatory?
It's a really good question, and I guess given we have been 80% domestic, I don't know how big the concern is actually in terms of coming into a reality in our region. But the media's done a fantastic job on scaring New Zealanders around the risks of freedom camping and the non-certified especially. I think it's probably worth looking into a bit more, because generally the uncertified, the little juicy campers and things, they're predominantly used by the international market, and I think, you know, that's really going to change in the future going forward, and it's not been a big part of our region's visitor market. We do have the domestic, and I think most of those are self-contained, so I think there's just probably a bit more of an education piece that needs to come nationally as we pivot more towards domestic tourism, but also with councils and within our role as well, so that our residents know and understand the benefits and the differences. It's a bit like when we talk about tourism, people think about packed tour buses in Queenstown and Rotorua, but when we talk about our visitor market, they understand, you know, they get that, and that there's people coming and sharing their part of New Zealand, and they want to engage and they want to, you know, share their local stories. So I think it's probably a little bit around the narrative, creating confusion and concern in the communities. The Pohongona Valley is probably a slightly trickier one, and I'm not a roading expert, but I know that it can be very narrow, steep, so potentially I'm probably not comfortable commenting on that and whether that's right or wrong.
Thank you. Good points there. Anybody else have a question for either Linda or Janet? No, so thank you. You've covered that well, and thank you also for the invitation for us to work closer with you. We do have a really excellent relationship with CEDA and the staff throughout all the various areas that you cover in economic development, but the visitor market, I agree, is one that, especially now, we're going to have to step up. So thank you for taking the time with your submission and joining us today. So have a good rest of the day and a good weekend.
You too. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, so time for our final submitter today, and welcome, Tony.
Hi.
Hi. I'm not sure what happened to your video, but we've got you sideways.
Oh.
There we go.
Sorry, I'm new to this. Can you see me all right?
Yes, we can. That's fine. Don't worry. We're all new to this and we're in this together. So thank you for making a submission. Your submission is on our page 64. So Tony, we have read your submission and you're welcome to highlight any of the key points you'd like to cover, and then we'll ask our team for any questions.
Okay, so goat welfare in New Zealand is a goat sanctuary in Central Hawke's Bay, and we also advocate and campaign against their tethering. Okay, so I'm just going to bring up the main points that why we oppose the tethering of animals on roadsides, particularly goats, as they're the most common animal to be tethered on a roadside. So they're a natural browser. So they really prefer tree prunings and weeds to grass. They eat the tops of longer grass. So being forced to eat right down is completely against unnatural for them. So we've had quite a few goats relinquished into our care that used to be lawnmowers, and they've always been thin and poor condition, and some have had scars around their neck from tethers, and one goat even had a chain. It was tied so tight around his neck it was eating into his neck. So things like that have happened to them. So we have valid animal welfare issues with tethering. So they get tangled easily. They can remain so for hours on end on a roadside if they're not being looked after properly. There's self-strangulation. There have been cases of goats being strangled tethered on banks, and they go down and they just hang themselves and tethered improperly. And roadsides, it's so vulnerable for them. Like there have been cases of cruelty from passers-by, dog attacks, and they've been stolen for slaughter. So that they have been prone to neglect both historically and to this day, probably largely to a lack of understanding to their true psyche and needs, and are thought of as a lawnmower, which they're really not. So you might see them on a roadside and think, oh, they're all good, they've got a hut, they've got water, but if you take a closer look, you may find that they're actually quite thin. They may need a drench, their hooves may need attending to, and there's also the loneliness and boredom of enduring this sort of life. And roadside grasses can be quite unpalatable due to exhaust fumes and not being fresh enough or long enough. So sometimes they're not moved enough, water gets tipped over, shelters are inadequate, and like some of them have spent years tethered this way. So tethers can be too short, or chains can be too heavy, and so by nature they love to run and have a play, and having company is everything to them. So we also have scientific studies to back up what we're saying. One notable one in 2010, entitled "The Importance of Social Behaviour for Goat Welfare and Livestock Farming," concluded goats suffer emotional stress being isolated and alone. And there have been similar studies since. So tethered animals, they're unable to express their natural behaviours. So the Animal Welfare Act now recognises animals as sentient, meaning that it's recognised they do experience emotions of loneliness, boredom, that sort of thing. So the Ministry of Primary Industries even admits goats are social and should not really be tethered. So we find the tethering of roadside goats really quite archaic and outdated. It's quite unjustifiable because they browse, they don't graze, and there's just been too many welfare issues. So it would be great to see councils move with the times and kind of not allow people to do it, because it is quite a minority and it's detrimental to their well-being. And I mean, there's more humane ways of keeping a roadside down, like mechanical scrub cutter. It's quite stupid, and it's time it shouldn't be allowed. So that's about it.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much. Very well covered. We've had a number of submissions asking for us to consider not allowing goats to be tethered. And a question was asked previously, and I'll ask it again to you. If we were to take this on board, obviously there's going to be an issue with the goats that are currently tethered. And, you know, even some of our rural schools have goats that are tethered. So what would your advice be around if we were to go down this path about how we would manage what happens to those goats?
There's plenty of sanctuaries and animal welfare organisations. We could all find homes for them. So that wouldn't be an issue.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to open it up to the rest of the team. Are there any questions of Tony? Councillor G. Taylor.
Hi, yeah, thanks for your submission, Tony. It's definitely been a popular topic, the goat tethering, for this review. I think my question would be, having had a think about it, would you be open to any sort of restrictions around tethering? I know some people sort of put a span of wire out and the goat can go along the wire, so it has quite a long run. Is there any, I understand that your preference would be to fully prohibit, would there be any sort of compromise with the way that tethering is undertaken?
No, not on the roadside. It's just they're too vulnerable. And the reason why they're put out there to eat grass, again, it's just contrary to the sort of animal they are. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Any final questions of Tony? No? Thank you, Tony, for your submission, and well spoken to it as well this morning, and thank you for taking the time to do that. So we will put that on the table with our deliberations, and in time we'll let you know where we've got to. So thank you, have a good day and a great weekend.
Thanks a lot for your time today and allowing me to speak.
You're welcome.
See you.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our submitters for today, and therefore the end of our council meeting. So thank you to everyone that's been involved and to our listeners, and I'll just hand you over to our Chief Executive.
Just an administrative matter for council. As you'll be aware, the YouTube live stream wasn't stable, so we've made a recording and this will be published on YouTube later. And then secondly, I'm on leave Wednesday through to Friday next week. So Hamish will be the acting chief executive in my place. So when you have the council workshops on Wednesday and Friday and the audit and risk meeting on Thursday, Hamish will be sitting in my place for that. Just wanted to give you that heads up. The reason for it is my wife has changed jobs and she's got 3 days off between finishing her current role and starting the new one. So we thought we'd take a bit of a break together. So
that's great. Thank you, Richard, and we wish you well with her new position and enjoy a couple of well-deserved days off. So for the rest of us, we will see you all back for our workshop next week, and so I officially close our council meeting.